joining us right now with what to expect from the meeting is Congressman Chris Collins. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's good to be with you, Maria. And as you know, I'm right at the Canadian border. I've got three of the main bridges between the U.S. and Canada right here in my district in Buffalo.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because trade obviously front and center. The president has signaled that Canada is not the problem, that Mexico has been the problem, but certainly we will see tweaks to NAFTA. What would you expect the conversation to be today?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe we have to make a differentiation between the northern border and the southern border. We have a lot of cooperation between the Canadians and the U.S. on the northern border, sharing information, and so we need to also make sure our border is secure on the northern border. It's not the same issues that we have. And certainly NAFTA is front and center. It's been my suggestion we should have a bilateral trade agreement between Canada and the U.S., and then another bilateral trade agreement between Mexico and the U.S. There's not very many things that are common, if you will, between Canada and Mexico. The Canadians speak our language. They certainly respect the environment and their workers. I mean, it's really... you know, when you look at Canadians, it's our first cousin. When you look at Mexico, the issues are so very different. I don't know that a NAFTA-type agreement, three-way with the three countries, makes a lot of sense. So we'll see where those trade negotiations go, but there's an awful lot of back-and-forth trade with Canada, certainly automotives in the Detroit area, pieces and parts coming back and forth across the border into the production of cars in the U.S. and also productions in Canada.
But you know,
agriculture and some of the other trade issues will be front and center.
The idea of a bilateral, Buck Sexton, makes sense. I was having this discussion with a leading business person over the weekend, and we were looking at the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And he said, would I ever do a deal with 20 other companies? No. Of course, I'm going to end up favoring one or two more so than the others, but the idea of doing a deal with 20 countries or the idea of doing a deal with, you know, 2 other countries, somebody's not going to get a fair share.
Well, certainly when you look at Canada as well, a country that's so important as a trading relationship. I believe it's second biggest in the world, second biggest for us, rather, in the world. And you look at some of the issues that can, I think, get a little political and a little sticky. Prescription drugs is one of them. That's an area where the Canadian system subsidizes their drugs, and so they're obviously much cheaper, and a lot of Americans look at that and say, well, prescription drugs much cheaper, that would be great, and it's just across the border. So there are some areas where it's a very specific U.S.-Canada issue, and I do think that that bilateral relationship would be a good idea. I just wanted to ask the Congressman, do you think that there's anything that will come up that might be a bit problematic? I've been wondering if Donald Trump will point out to Trudeau that Canada has a point system for immigration, that they actually take a very by-the-numbers view of who they should let in outside of refugees for people that they'll take in as immigrants to the country. We might actually learn a thing from Canada when it comes to immigration on that score.
Well, I think there's no question Prime Minister Trudeau is very much a socialist and certainly left-leaning. And you're exactly right. You know, when the Canadians get upset with us on immigration, they should look in the mirror, because they absolutely have a point system, like many other countries do, that they say, you know, what are you going to bring to our economy? What's your education? How are you going to contribute to making our country better? Versus the U.S., which is more of a lottery system, or if you can find a third cousin twice removed, you know, that's your nexus to getting into the U.S. So, you know, he's speaking a little bit, you know, out of the side of his mouth, if you will, when he tries to condemn us. At the same time, they do not have a free and open refugee system and immigration like the U.S. You know, has a very different system. So the Prime Minister, you know, there's some issues. Will be interesting to see, as he's a bit of a rock star in Canada, and some of the issues he's taken against Donald Trump personally. Let's see how that plays out today when they meet.
Yeah, I want to get your take, everybody, on this story. A local school board in Windsor, Ontario, is canceling all school trips into the United States, citing uncertainty over the political climate in the U.S. and fears over the travel ban. Congressman, what about that? I mean, they don't want to get stuck with their kids on their way if, in fact, the president comes up with a new travel ban.
Well, I mean, that's the absurdity of, you know, much what you were saying earlier you saw in the Grammys. It's the liberal left, and there's no question whatsoever that Prime Minister Trudeau would fit well with our Hollywood culture and the liberal left. I mean, that's who he is. So they're taking some of these steps in Canada, and I think the Prime Minister's, he has no problem with that type of action. So Donald Trump's pretty plain spoken. President Trump calls it out like it is. I have to think that Prime Minister Trudeau may be just a tad uncomfortable today because he's been out there on the left, talking about what's been wrong with the immigration order and the like. So I suspect it could be a little bit uncomfortable.
But Donald Trump, this is Lauren Simonetti, has promised, new executive orders or new action on immigration and travel this week. What do you expect the president to say?
Well, I expect what we're going to see is 98% of what we saw in the first executive order, but making it clear it's not a Muslim ban. There's no religious litmus test, and he's going to make sure that the issues the judge brought up in Seattle, which were nonsense to begin with, are addressed front and center in a new executive order, because he does clearly have the authority that's been vested in him as president singularly to secure our borders, and on the immigration front, do what he thinks is in the best interest of this country. And so the most expeditious way is to do just that. Issue a new order, make sure what the judge was nitpicking and which was not accurate in Seattle are taken care of, and he can move forward with a big win.
Representative Collins, Kirsten Haglund here. When you talk about the school closing the Windsor school saying that they're not going to bring their students to the United States, I know I grew up in Detroit, right across the river from Windsor, and it's completely ridiculous. But I'm wondering if you think that some of this fear-mongering from, say, the schools in Canada or from leaders around the globe that are overreacting to a lot of President Trump's, his work so far, do you think that that's going to die down as people start to get used to this administration?
Well, yeah, anything like what we've seen is going to die down. Even in my district, we have something they're now calling Truthful Tuesday, and 50 to 100 show up at my office every Tuesday for Truthful Tuesday, disrupting in the plaza, business plaza that I'm in, other businesses. We'll see. Maybe the first 100 days they'll be able to keep this going, but at some point, this isn't really organic. It's organized, and it's kind of the thing to do right now for the liberal left. But I do believe it'll die down. But, it's too bad the kids up in Windsor are not going to get to be able to travel down. Field trips are, a highlight of anyone in school.
Yeah.
And, the camaraderie that comes with that, and they're losing out.
Well, it's partly
so I really
misinformation,
feel bad for the
right?
kids.
I mean, it's just misinformation. I mean, you've got Democrats going above and beyond, delaying the president's cabinet from being confirmed to attacking the president directly.